The Glock is the most popular pistol in the world, so it's no surprise that this pistol has been a trusty sidearm in dozens of video games. It's a pistol that has enjoyed a huge amount of pop culture and media attention, but has also been surrounded by its share of myths.
They shoot underwater.
From its naming conventions, its rumoured ability to pass unseen through metal detectors,
It's a porcelain gun made in Germany.
and how the weapons designer started out engineering kitchen accessories rather than weaponry, as well as Glock's other surprising services. With a slew of different variants and options, its virtual depictions can vary from basic default pea shooters, pairs of akimbo bullet hoses, or the most Gucci'd up of guns. Join myself and Jonathan Ferguson at the Royal Armouries in the UK to take a deep dive into the story and video game legacy of the iconic Glock.
I can wholeheartedly endorse the new breed of Austrians. Recontoured grips, flared magwell for easier reloads, and I know you'll appreciate the custom porting.
So we've got plenty of examples on the table, but can you give us a brief history of the Glock?
I'll do my best. This is by no means everything that we have. So I suppose the main thing about Glock, he's not the only firearms inventor who was not a firearms person, but he's maybe the most famous now. So Gaston Glock had a tool company, sort of accessory household goods making company. They made the Glock knife, which I guess was their way into military, warlike stores, as we used to say. Polymer grip, modern design, and he decided someone should make a polymer framed, modernized pistol. And like all good non-specialists, he looked at what was there. The Browning system with the tilting barrel, 1911, the Browning pistol. Polymer frame is a new idea. HK had done it with the VP70, but the VP70 was terrible. So basically, let's make a polymer framed handgun that everyone can use, police, military, whatever, that isn't terrible. Far from terrible. It's one of the most reliable, one of the best general entry level plus. It's good for, it's used by everyone from the most novice users all the way up to some tier 1 units use it as well. Classic blocky look to it. A very hard finish on the slide, and that glass reinforced polymer that, again, Glock wasn't the first to do anything, but this is a coalescence of 100 years of self-loading pistol design, and it's the benchmark for modern self-loading pistols.
And it started with the 17, is that
Yes.
correct? There's assumptions about the origin of that number in particular.
There are.
But the round count is one of them.
Yeah.
But I understand that you have made your own discoveries.
I wouldn't even go that far. So if you look at the versions of the Glock website, they're pretty clear on this. It was the 17th design of Gaston Glocks, perhaps the 17th patent applied for, because he only had 12 patents granted before the Glock 17.
But not specifically, it's not the 17th pistol.
Nope.
17th
The
invention.
first pistol of his 17th invention that he's counting as an invention. What it definitely isn't is the patent number. The round count is coincidental, but that's caused a lot of confusion. So we have Gen 1 17s. There's a Gen 1 19 here, so that came out pretty quickly. Just a cut down. In fact, you can see where the frame has been cut, literally cut down to create this shorter height weapon and a shorter slide and a shorter barrel. And many say, even to this day, the Glock 19 is like, if you had to pick a gun for any purpose, it's probably going to be that.
So the curtain rail was the first invention from Gaston Glock?
I think that's right.
So that's not called the Glock 1 curtain rail. No. And of course there's other variants, other very interesting variants. I think 17 is the one that a lot of people are familiar with. The 18 has its own very unique machine pistol, especially when outfitted with something like a drum magazine. The C, I believe, is from the compensated cuts, you've said?
Correct. So we actually have a 17C. They're rare, but they do exist. So you have these cuts, these sort of half-moon cuts in the top of the barrel to put hot gases upwards. It's like, think of an astronaut in space doing EVA or whatever, like jets of gas going that way, keeps the muzzle down. Useful in rapid fire on a 17, I would say borderline essential, and you'll see this with some footage hopefully at some point, with this selector switch that takes you from semi to automatic.
We saw you put a few rounds through the Glock 18 automatic with a drum magazine.
Yep.
How did that feel?
It's pretty nuts. Very rare that I shoot something of that nature, and as you saw, it was all over the place, quite frankly. Like the drum mag adds a little bit of like an anchor stability, or like a pendulum almost underneath the gun. And if you really lean forward and you really torque your wrists down, you can keep it. Have a look on the internet. People can do it. I have failed to do it, but I've shown you why. For most purposes, these things are not very useful at all. It's bullets that way. Get the heck out.
Seeing it in action, it did seem that the real-world application was a lot more niche, firing that on automatic, like you say, suppressive fire, move. Harder to see that being more useful than, even rapid single shots.
Someone with more practice and skill, they can double the distance, double the rate of fire, and it makes the 18 pointless on short bursts because a string of rapid shots from a semi-auto pistol is more accurate, just the same volume of fire. The only real application for that 18, or 18C in that case, which should make it a bit more controllable with the compensator, is literally just a wall of lead. VIP protection or emergency shooting out of a car to then get the heck away. It's really the only niche. They're expensive as well, they're rare. They're just not that prevalent outside of pop culture.
Yeah, and it's inverse, I think, to how pop culture portrays them. In games, the 18C is often like one of the overpowered machine pistols. In the utility of action shooters like Call of Duty, having one of those or two of those sometimes, you don't have to worry about the quite immense recoil that the 18C was seeming to throw out. And in movies and games, it's the spectacle more than anything. And seeing it, it is quite a spectacle, but not a seemingly very useful one.
No, I mean, squaring the circle somewhat is obviously the characters you play in games are the top tier 1 plus. So they have had hundreds of rounds of imaginary practice with these things. They've got wrists like tree trunks, in universe it's fine, obviously, and it's fun as well. But in real life, you're going to end up with a result more like I did.
It was really interesting to see you shooting the Glock 18C, and we talked about, how that was to handle and shoot, because that is, I think, I'd say the most popular video game version, if not the version most featured. The Glock 18 has that fully automatic appeal. And you mentioned the polymer that makes up the Glock. That is a source of quite a few myths, I believe, about the Glock. It for a long time was considered, what's the line? Is it Lord of War?
The Glock is interesting. It's made of a polymer composite. Many of my clients feel they can get through airport security without setting off a lot of bells and whistles. Personally, I do not recommend that.
And in Die Hard 2, they calls it a Glock 7, I think?
Yes.
Calls it a Glock 7.
Weirdly.
And that it was, again, invisible through metal detectors.
That punk pulled a Glock 7 on me. You know what that is? It's a porcelain gun made in Germany. Doesn't show up on your airport x-ray machines here, and it costs more than you make in a month.
Almost completely wrong. I did contact Stephen D'Souza once, who wrote Die Hard and Die Hard 2, I believe. And he didn't really have a satisfactory answer, because he was clearly going from the gun magazines of the day, but kind of half remembered. And he may have been witnessing one of the many press reports claiming that this thing was undetectable, and he just extrapolated that, it must be made of ceramic. Ceramic's not metallic either. But of course what it's actually made of is glass reinforced polymer. And most of the gun is still steel.
Would it be fair to say that the Glock, in general, is the most popular handgun in the world?
I'd say so. Yeah, well, I suppose we have to caveat that with there are a lot of others that have had a head start, like 1911 variants. If you went with by type, I dare say there are more 1911 pistols still around than I don't know. I don't think anyone's done the research on that. We've done it for things like the AK, the AR, but it's definitely, if it isn't there already, it's getting there, and it's going to become the world's most popular handgun.
Much more popular than a lot of his other inventions. I did find, looking through Glock's sites, some of their other offshoots of business, and Glock does offer a horse breeding service.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so Glock, there is a Glock Stallion that I believe you can stud.
Just like the lads in the Falklands did.
But its popularity is, of course, incredible. And I think that has been thrust by its pop culture nods, appearances. It's been referenced in music across the decades.
Yep.
It's appeared in so many films in iconic roles. And of course, games. There's barely a modern shooter without a Glock. But I think in that lies some of its strengths in terms of how recognisable it is.
Oh, absolutely. It
Throwing
stood
back
out.
into Glock's brand identity.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it stood out like a sore thumb if you want, but in a sea of old world steel framed pistols, this thing was an absolute revelation. The Elmer Fuds hated it because it was modern and blocky and uncomfortable and chunky because of that 17 round or 15 round double stack width to it. The squared off trigger guard that comes from that short-lived fad of using your support hand finger to help pull the muzzle down. No one does that anymore, but it's still on the guns because it's part of that design IP almost. Literally, they have sued airsoft manufacturers over copying this design because it's iconic. And I think that's the trap they're in. They don't want to innovate it too much because if it stops looking like a Glock, well, it's no longer a Glock.
I think it's very much a recent issue in terms of, the naming nomenclature of the Glock. When it first appeared in Duke Nukem 3D, it had rounded edges, but was,
Is that a Glock?
apparently, from what I understood, I believe it has the sort of
I
square
guess
off
I can see it.
back. And
Glock inspired.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's regarded as basically the first appearance. I still think of, the first Half-Life game.
Absolutely, for me it would be Half-Life.
Yeah, but again, older games when a pistol was called a pistol. Counter-Strike, of course, we talk about a lot. It's got the not real burst function when it is a terrorist weapon as an alt fire. Obviously the 18 has fully automatic, but I'm right in understanding there's no specific burst function.
No. Other automatic pistols, fully automatic pistols went for burst, 93R, the VP70. But the drawback, as you'll see in that footage, it's one bullet or all the bullets, and you're hanging on for the ride almost.
But what I find very interesting is, especially in games where it's just called the G17, G18, it's just a G. It's Glock in everything, but because of the iconic shape, the silhouette, it's hard to get away from something feeling like a Glock.
Yeah, well, as real-world manufacturers have found, like the more they lean into the polymer frame, the striker-fired nature of it, the various ergonomic features that come and grow, like grip textures, finger bumps, accessory rails, whatever. All firearms are converging toward much the same sort of design, and the template for most pistols is the Glock. So unless you go hammer-fired, or like SIG, you turn your hammer-fired gun into a striker-fired gun with the 320, it's very hard to avoid ending up looking like this. You need to put lots of arbitrary cuts on the slide to differentiate it. Different trigger guard shape, different grip shape. You can do it, but at the end of the day, you've got to get 17 to 20 rounds of 9mm into it at a favourable grip angle that will feed reliably. It's very hard to avoid coming off Glock.
But that doesn't make it any less fun, especially with, G18, I think it was called in Modern Warfare 2, with, a drum magazine, akimbo. What I find quite interesting is the Glock is very often one of the very early pistols that you get in a game.
Yep.
And it's usually very easily replaced, not the best option. I feel harsh because it is a very interesting weapon, but often pretty forgettable. But inversely, as soon as you get to the 18 version, it's like the overpowered gun in the game. So many examples of the 18 appearing, especially akimbo, fully automatic with a stick mag or a drum. It's like the game meta. So it can exist on both ends of like a virtual firearms loadout spectrum. I think because of that, it further cements the awareness. It's like, well, it's my first one, put it to one side because I've unlocked something more interesting, but then you unlock all the weapons and suddenly it's like, yeah, this is the one I'm going to keep because it's got a massive mag and can just fill the screen with bullets. And when we shot the 18, that's another thing that games have to worry less about. If you're in an arena shooter and someone's very close to you, that's, the hail of bullets that it can throw out becomes an advantage rather than a drawback of the weapon.
Yeah, especially as you're not having to accommodate a realistic reloading scenario, like carrying all those rounds. How do you get them into the gun when both of your hands are filled? Some of the major drawbacks of using automatic weapons, in both hands as well, are automatically negated by it being a video game, really. So even though in reality, you'd be better off with that starting pistol and some training.
And with, its iconic shape, the elements that I feel make a Glock, the sights, the tilting barrel, that squared off shape. There's a lot of games that will lean into a couple elements, or one or two. So even sci-fi guns in a lot of examples end up feeling like a Glock. I suppose when it first came out, it was a bit of a sci-fi gun. It's another weapon that I don't think games will ever move away from in terms of at least some of the DNA carrying through. But as you know, it's still a very popular pistol today, enormous in pop culture, enormous in terms of real world use as well. This is, to many people, when they think handgun, they think a Glock. There's arguments between Glocks and 1911s. It's become a huge pop cultural touchstone as a firearm. And because of that, the Glock, in both virtual and the real world, is here to stay in one form or another.
Oh yeah, that scene in Mad Max Fury Road, as much as it was weird, thinking, well, hang on, when did the world end if Glocks have proliferated? But anyway, on the face of it, yeah, Glocks are going to be around in 100 years in post-whatever, water wars, nuclear fallout. They'll be around and they'll still be able to be made to work. They're the AK of pistols.
And as games have moved into the fascination of attachments and customizing the weapon, it's also a pistol that has that in spades. Like we can see this example here with the suppressor, the light module, the drum magazine, but then games like Tarkov will offer a carbine kit for the 18. Modern Warfare 2 had the Fab Defense carbine conversion kit too. It's also a gun that can tap into that sort of player expectation in very easy and authentic ways. And
forever.
Referencing what you mentioned before about Glock's motto of perfection, Glock perfection, it could be the perfect video game gun, if perhaps not the real world one.
I mean, there is no such thing as perfect, is there? But it's good enough for the real world. Like there is no one pistol that is in every way better than a Glock. If you're going to pick a rifle anywhere in the world, it might well be a Kalashnikov variant or an AR variant. If it's a pistol, it's probably going to be a Glock variant. So as close to perfect as you're going to get.